Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This week, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, continues his exclusive series of monthly interviews with 12 News. Chokwe Antar Lumumba previews the next phase of a Metro Crime Summit, proposed rate hikes for trash collection, and celebrations and reflections as the city marks its bicentennial. And later, constitutional law professor Matt Steffey remarks as the U.S. Supreme Court considers Dobbs versus the Jackson Women's Health Organization. Mississippi could shake the nation with a legal win on its abortion limits. That's all ahead this morning on Mississippi Insight. First, Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba joins us here in studio. The Jackson Democrat is serving his second term in office as the mayor of Jackson, and we're glad to have you with us here for Mississippi Insight. Thank you for joining us as we talk to you on a monthly basis about issues facing the city of Jackson. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for your time and look forward to our discussion.
Since we last talked with you, you held a crime summit involving local, state, and federal agencies. Representatives of higher learning institutions were among those involved. Tell us what that meeting was all about and what's next in that process from the summit.
Well, first and foremost, it was a very productive meeting, and we were very keen on making certain that it wasn't just a venting session, but that we were able to actually derive both long-term and short-term goals from that meeting. And so we were very pleased with the level of participation from not only our local law enforcement all the way up through the federal government and as you mentioned, also our institutions of higher learning. We were able to break out into different working groups, one that dealt with detention, one that dealt with the issues of enforcement and policing, and another group that dealt with policy and legal issues that we deal with. You know, we spoke about the various areas of our criminal justice system where there are gaps. And we're unable to, just depend on the system as it has been orchestrated or developed. From the standpoint of officers who make arrests, but there's no place to put them in a jail which is overburdened because the court systems aren't progressing through trials. They are, sometimes backlogged by 3 years. And then also understanding that those court systems are also confronted with the challenge of a state crime lab that is, having a difficult time processing evidence, and the medical examiner's office as well. So they're not in a position to go to trial. And so how do we look at short-term and long-term solutions to how we deal with that process? In addition to this meeting that was pretty much geared towards the enforcement side of what we deal with in law enforcement, we're looking forward to another meeting with social service agencies to talk about, not only the extrinsic influences to how we deal with crime, but the intrinsic influences. How do we, help decrease the level of trauma and the level of desperation that sometimes leads people to do this? And I think that we have to cover it on both ends of the spectrum. We have to understand that it's not simply a notion of, people don't know that, carjacking someone does not come with consequences and ultimately might lead them in prison, right? How do we get, start at a very young age to move them away from those nefarious activities? So when those instances do take place, we do want to be certain that we deal with it in a commensurate way. But how do we reduce the level of propensity to see that take place? The meeting was as I expected it to be or wanted it to be. It was a meeting where we actually got into the nuts and bolts. There was homework that we all walked away with. We walked away with, as I said, both short-term and long-term plans that we wanted to make sure that we orchestrated. And so after that meeting, we followed it up with an email to all of the participants, reminding them of what the takeaways were from the meeting and what our homework assignments are. And so we do plan on having both another meeting with the enforcement side and, as I said, on the social service side. But this is going to be something that is going to be going on for some time. I will add just one last point to that. It was important to us, while I certainly make every endeavor to incorporate the public and the media. It was important to us that we got behind closed doors, because you would be amazed, Byron, how productive things become when it's not just a matter of posturing, but it's a matter of how we work together. And so, I commend everyone who participated. They came with the spirit of working, and we were able to do so.
The city is setting another record on homicides. How do you deal with that in the image that it's having on the city to move the city forward?
Well, it's a very daunting and distressing thing, right? We also understand that unfortunately we're not in exclusive company, right? We're seeing this take place nationwide. And so what we have to do, that doesn't mean that it's okay because it's happening nationwide, but what we need to do is be able to identify least common denominators and why this is taking place. Once again, not only have the extrinsic influences, those extrinsic influences are your police, that's your incarceration, that's your, all of the things that we look in a criminal justice system. But the intrinsic influences that deal with the young at-risk person before they find themselves in that place, right? How do we interrupt those cycles? And so that's what we're focused on, that's what we're geared in, and we're going to continue to pursue that.
As we record this on a Thursday, you're preparing for a town hall about garbage services. What do you plan to talk about about the services, and where do we stand?
Well, I'm well aware that talking about trash isn't necessarily considered a sexy discussion, but it is a necessary conversation. And there are a number of things that we need to talk about. First and foremost, we want to operate in the light of transparency. And so we're informing our residents through every step, the timeline, from the point where the RFP initially went out, the time for responses, when those responses are closed. We've informed them, and we are going to continue to inform them of, what is a requirement within the RFP, and what is an option. Basically, trying to make certain that we pursue the best deal for Jackson. What does that best deal look like? It looks like not only a company that is going to execute the services of picking up the trash for our residents, assist and be a partner with the city and how we clean up our city, but also a company that treats its workforce with dignity, right? When we talk about issues of crime and you talk about what opportunities are there for people, there's a close association. Crime isn't unique to Jackson. It isn't unique to communities that resemble Jackson. Wherever you find high poverty, you find high crime. And so if we're able to build not only from our internal resources, but even the contracts we put in place, an ability to create a better condition which gives more opportunity in our city, I think that we're one step closer to being the safe city that we want to see. In addition to talking about the points of the RFP, we're having the very real and honest conversation about the need and not only the need, the absolutely unavoidable measure of having to increase our garbage rates. And so we're looking at potentially $10 in addition to what is being charged now in an increase, a flat fee for our rates. This is necessary for multiple reasons. One, now that we've gone through the process of putting out an RFP twice already, we have a very good idea of around where submissions will be in terms of cost proposals. Those cost proposals are significantly higher than the rate that we pay now. And that's from every company that has proposed. And we don't have the luxury of just choosing the rate. They look at tonnage, they look at how much they're picking up, and that's where they establish their rates. It isn't only going up and for Jackson, it's going up for surrounding cities. I know that it happened for Madison. I know that they're looking at it in Canton. So this is taking place in all around our area. In addition to the fact that those proposals are significantly higher, we also have not changed our garbage rates in over 12 years. That is unheard of. There is no service, and we have to be clear, and I understand residents are burdened with a lot. We talk about the taxes we pay. We talk about all that we contribute towards making certain that we do our fair share. Well, garbage collection, along with water bills, are not, a resource that you get through your taxes. Those are paid for services, much like your energy bill, much like your Atmos bill. And in that same vein, the rate that you're paying Entergy 12 years ago is not the rate that you're paying today. The rate you paid Atmos 12 years ago was not the rate that you pay today. And where this hurts our residents is in the services that they're later seeing. Because we're operating in the red, it hampers our ability to make certain that we're picking up the litter. It interferes with our ability to make sure that we have the number of roll-off dumpster days that you want to see. And so what goes into your sanitation costs on your water bill is more than just your trash pickup. It is all of those services that we have to execute to do the normal blocking and tackling that we want to do as a city.
Has Waste Management put another bid in? Are they still in this game, or are they?
So at this time, I do not know who has put in a bid. The other thing that we have discussed, just to give another layer of protection and avoid any appearance of impropriety, is that we have incorporated through the technical review process a blind scoring process. So that means that companies are given some type of identifying number as opposed to their name. That way, if someone just happens to have a relationship with Garbage X, right, that person is not, they are not influenced by that relationship, but instead they're influenced by the merits of the proposal itself. And so we adopted this process. I want to give kudos to our city attorney, Ms. Katori Martin, who comes to us from the Attorney General's office and has done a lot of work in procurement for the state. And the state a few years ago incorporated this particular practice in order to have objectivity in the process.
Gotcha. Bicentennial, the city is celebrating its bicentennial. Talk about what's going to happen over the next 12 to 13 months that you're celebrating the bicentennial. Why is this so important for the city? We're
going to have the longest celebration that you've ever known, Byron. We're going to celebrate for an entire year. Jackson, the idea to commission for a new capitol actually happened 200 years ago, at this time, around this time. And it took about a year for the city to actually get, to be incorporated in that way. And so we're going to celebrate from the time. We just, had our big press conference, and we threw confetti in the air and celebrated with the sonic boom and a number of stakeholders across the city, discussing how we're going to make this celebration our residents. And so it's not Mayor Lumumba celebration. It will be, what does Byron want to see out of this celebration? How do we bring and draw out the beauty of each community and have, it reflect the uniqueness of each community? And so, it's still in formation. There are some things that are set, but through the course of a year, we have plenty of opportunity to grow and develop additional means of celebrating our 200th anniversary.
Is there going to be one big event that's going to kind of bring everything together?
There will be several events, several big events and small events. But in terms of a culminating event, we would expect that there will be a culminating event at the end of our celebration. All
right, Mayor Lumumba, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back. The nation will have to wait until next June to hear the outcome of Wednesday's groundbreaking argument at the U.S. Supreme Court. The state of Mississippi went before the highest court in the land to promote a direct legal challenge to abortion rights in the United States.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey haunt our country. They have no basis in the Constitution. They have no home in our history or traditions. They've damaged the democratic process. They've poisoned the law. They've choked off compromise. For 50 years, they've kept this court at the center of a political battle that it can never resolve. And 50 years on, they stand alone. Nowhere else does this court recognize a right to end a human life.
The state's only abortion provider, the Jackson Women's Health Clinic, is suing Mississippi over its 2018 law banning abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. but it may be the wedge that anti-abortion conservatives need to overturn the court's 1973 Roe versus Wade ruling. It potentially could give each of the 50 states the right to determine its own laws and limits on abortion access. Mississippi College School of Law professor Matt Steffey offered his thoughts on the hearing.
What stood out to me today were two things. On the one hand, how Justices Barrett and Gorsuch played it close to the vest, did not tip their hand in a meaningful way. The second thing that stood out to me was, again, if oral argument questions really do, in this case, reveal a justice's thinking, and many people have made that assumption and been wrong. People have often made that assumption and been right. But it's not a sure line of a sure inference. But if oral argument questions, in fact, are revealing, Justice Kavanaugh seems to indicate a readiness to overturn Roe. Seems to, and certainly a readiness to abandon the viability law. And if that's the case, then we are moving closer and closer to a block of justices, of conservative justices, overruling Roe. It's also clear, but this is not new, that Chief Justice Roberts would prefer a more incremental approach. And if this law can be upheld without overruling Roe, that clearly seems to be his preference. Which could be done if Roe is maintained, but the viability line is eroded. There seem to be questions indicating that some of the justices in what now counts for the center, and the center of this court would have been way on the right in many courts in history. So what the center of where we are now suggests that the 15 weeks is enough time for women to learn they're pregnant and make a decision to terminate it, and thus 15 weeks is not a burden that we can't live with.
And why would 15 weeks be an inappropriate line? So viability, it seems to me, doesn't have anything to do with choice. But if it really is an issue about choice, why is 15 weeks not enough time?
For a few reasons, Your Honor. First, the state has conceded that some women will not be able to obtain an abortion before 15 weeks, and this law will bar them from doing so. And a reasonable possibility standard would be completely unworkable for the courts. It would be both less principled and less workable than viability. And some of the reasons for that are, without viability, there will be no stopping point. States will rush to ban abortion at virtually any point in pregnancy. Mississippi itself has a 6-week ban that it's defending with very similar arguments as it's using to defend the 15-week ban. And there are states that have bans.
Well, I know, but I'd like to focus on the 15-week ban, because that's not a dramatic departure from viability. It is the standard that the vast majority of other countries have. When you get to the viability standard, we share that standard with the People's Republic of China and North Korea.
There were some questions, I don't remember from whom, I do recall perhaps from Justice Sotomayor, about how the court could maintain its legitimacy if it's 3 new justices, new world order, new outcome. And I do think those are difficult questions for the Solicitor General, the lawyer, the Attorney General tapped to argue this case. So I think Justice Sotomayor laid out some questions that put in stark relief, right, the way the world looks depending on which side of this you fall. Whether the court looks principled or political, and whether this looks like a revival of concern for developing life or an abandonment of concern for women who feel the need to terminate a pregnancy. As Mississippi is not a place rich in social services for poor mothers. The end of legal abortion won't be the end of abortion. We know from the pre-Roe world that will push some number of vulnerable and poor women into unregulated, unsafe, what used to be called back alley abortion providers. That desperate women will seek desperate solutions. The idea that closing this one clinic solves the issue is false in two ways. Women of means can leave the state, and desperate women will make desperate choices. And so if the state legislature gains the power to regulate fully in this area, let's hope it does so with some support and empathy for the challenges facing mothers in difficult circumstances.
We'll be sure to ask Professor Steffey for his analysis once the Supreme Court hands down its ruling. We'll be right back. Our thanks to Jackson Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba and Professor Steffey for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.